Yeah, I'm on it. I just started it, so you're good to go whenever y'all want.
Okay. All right. Well, hello everyone. Not sure how many folks we have. Should be quite a few. This is our second Adobe Experience Manager Champions office hours. We are talking about Adobe Experience Manager as a cloud service this morning. Thank you all for joining us. We are a bunch of different folks from the client side and from Adobe partners. We're going to be talking you through Adobe Experience Manager as a cloud service this morning. Let's go over to the second slide, Gaurang, and we go over the agenda real quick. First, we'll talk about what is the Adobe Champion Program, right? So why are you in this session with us? We'll provide some introductions for the folks who are here. We'll answer some pre-submitted questions, and thank you all for submitting your questions. We have, I think, about 15 questions total. Really great questions, and thank you about that. And then any live questions that come up, we can try to cover live, or if you want to submit in the chat, we'll try to answer those live. Anything we can't answer, obviously, we'll address in a future office hour session, or we can feel free to email the organizers of the meeting, and we'll address them via email, or maybe again in a future conversation, create another session for that. So without further ado, we have a lot of questions to answer. Let me talk about the AEM Champion Program, Gaurang, if you want to go to the third slide. So as far as the program is concerned, the Adobe Experience Manager Champion Program is kind of like the Analytics Champions and the Marketo Champions. We're going into our second year. We recognize expert practitioners, again, partners, clients of Adobe. We share our technical expertise and best practices and strategies with a broader community through Adobe Experience League, through webinars like this one, and the Adobe Champion Program sessions that we might do. We collaborate directly with Adobe product management teams and leaders to support the Adobe Experience Manager implementations. And then if you were interested to be part of the program, we're going to share a link in the chat that will take you to the page where starting, I believe, May 2nd through June 2nd, you can submit your application to become part of the program. And if you were to participate, then you'll be part of this group, and you'll be able to host other presentations. I'm going to ask everyone to hit their mute button. And you can collaborate with us, engage with us in exclusive speaking opportunities. Hopefully we can see a lot of you at the summit that happens every year and things like that. It's a very exciting program, and we'd be honored to have you. Quick presentations for everyone. These are all your panelists here. So Max is joining us at 12:30 plus a.m. in Australia. He's joining us from Australia. Go ahead, Max, and we'll go down the line from left to right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this great opportunity to discuss these things with you guys. It's always great to see great panelists, and also a lot of participants. We have 42 so far, Greg, so you'll be happy with that.
All right.
Hopefully we can give you some good answers.
Thank you, Max. Yep. We'll go to Brett next.
Sure. Brett Birschbach, SVP of Adobe Practice at Bounteous. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Brett. Gaurang, who's also driving the show because I couldn't get my teams up to par for you guys. Hey, Gaurang.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, my name is Gaurang Mehta, President and Chief Architect at Innovations, a AEM consulting practice based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Put that in the chat. It's the next tech frontier. So all people welcome to visit North Carolina and move here. It's a growing tech community. But yeah, excited to be here, and hopefully we can answer some questions and learn things together.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Gaurang. Rami, our best looking guy of the group.
What's up?
I take objection to that.
Right.
I think it's you, Greg.
We'll have a vote. So before everybody leaves, vote. I joke, but if you want to. So Ramil Gamal, Senior Solution Architect. I run my own little one-person Rene consulting agency that has to do everything with Adobe.
Perfect. Thank you,
Mr.
Rami.
Martin.
And Martin is joining us
Oh, yeah.
from the UK. Hi, Martin.
Yeah, hi guys. So yeah, Martin Noble, I'm Chief Technology Officer of XIO, so we're part of the wider IBM in the UK.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. And obviously the next slide is myself. I'm a web content product owner at T. Rowe Price. I am not a developer, so direct all your questions to the rest of the panelists. But in all seriousness, I mostly deal with author and admin side. So it's great to be in these conversations with these guys, and I'm learning a bunch of stuff. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this meeting, but before, let's go to the next slide. If you're, again, interested in being an AEM champion, we'll go ahead and take your applications from May 2nd to June 2nd, and the application page link, we'll put it in the chat. I have it posted in our Slack channel, so we'll put it in our chat here, because I don't think that link is accessible through this slide here. All right, should we get to our questions? Let's we can get to, yes, we'll have the recording available in the AEM Champions office hours. We'll put the link to the chat as well, so you can access the meeting, the recording of the meeting as well. So we'll have that in the chat for you to review. Let's go to our first question, I guess. So we open up because we have a lot of questions. I guess the first question that we had here is going to Rami. The question that came in was how to access the AEM generic list of published instance in AEM as a cloud service. Go ahead, Rami, take it.
Awesome. So I'll give you a solution to the question, but I'll discuss why you shouldn't do it in the first place.
Rami,
so
can I interrupt?
The solution.
Can I interrupt real quick? So one of the things that we talked about yesterday, I thought that was really a good idea is, if anyone that has answered the question is in the group and you guys want to give more clarity before we answer the question or afterwards, feel free to. I think that'll be hopefully valuable to just have a discourse.
Yeah, good point, Goran. If you're in a meeting and you provided that question, and you have extra feedback, feel free to let us know.
Sorry, Rami, all yours.
No worries, no worries. I get eager to answer questions apparently. So let's look at where the lists by default get stored. So anything that you do when it comes to ACS common lists gets stored under ETC. Now, with the cloud, there is a service that allows you to go through the JCR repository. However, that directory, you will not be able to see ACS common lists. There is a reason behind that. Now, to answer your question, is there a way? Yes. On the published instance, eventually you can just go with the path.json, and as long as the dispatcher is allowing the selector and it's allowing the extension, you'll get a JSON representation of whatever node you're trying to get. So you can use it that way, right? However, let's go back to the why does it not exist in the repository and why I personally do not think you should be using it in the first place. Content should be under /content, right? And we go into the cloud, a lot of things are being more systematic. They're more governed. As a result, you should not have actual content under /etc. So what you should be looking into is either moving that generic list into /content. That's one way of doing it. I still think that would be my second option. Option number one is what Adobe now provides you with, which is content fragments. And I've done this with a lot of clients where you no longer need generic lists. In most cases, generic list is a key value pair. Anyways, it's very limiting. So if you're looking at data and data structure, then move away from generic lists, go to content fragments. You'll have better APIs, you'll have GraphQL integration, and a whole bunch of other stuff. That's it in a nutshell. I'll pass it back to see if there's any more discussion points on that question or any follow-ups.
Thank you, Rami. That makes sense to me. If there's no other feedback, I guess we can move on to the next question. And that's something that I think Martin and the group are going back and forth at. And the question is, so we'll have Martin answer that question, how to achieve AEM author clustering by using AEM as a cloud service using TARMK as a data store.
Yeah, so I guess the critical first point to say is that in cloud service, you get clustering for free. So the whole point of the cloud architecture is that all the tiers are clustered and that is part of the platform, and it's designed that way. And you don't need to care anymore about how many author instances or how many published instances or how many
Right.
dispatches or whatever. Is that you can sort of just allow the system to do that, because it should scale automatically. If you say you're having a Christmas event or Black Friday or something like that, and you've suddenly got a huge amount more content authoring, if you're overloading your existing authoring instances, it will automatically spin up additional instances of the authoring cluster so that it will spread that load. So in theory, it should be entirely transparent to you and your users, and both internal and external, as to how many servers there are, what the infrastructure layout actually is. And effectively, the beauty of it is you just pay for what you're using. So if you're using a lot more authoring capacity for a period of time, you'll pay more for that period of time. But then as you come out of that period of time, you pay less, and you go back to your effectively your normal rate. And the same thing with the published tier, is that if you suddenly get a huge amount more requests coming through, or something changes about the content or that kind of thing, then you may pay more for a period, but then that's going to go back to whatever level it was before if that thing changes. So you kind of don't have to worry about how the storage, what method is it TarMK, is it MongoDB or anything like that. You can just say it's just the cloud service platform, that it's a case of, am I accessing the author or the publish, and that's it. And the system will basically manage the sizing of those, and you can monitor that through the through the service interface to see, okay, what actual load of those things, or what rate of requests and things are we seeing, so that you might be seeing, actually, if you're seeing actually we're getting a lot of cost on the publish side, maybe that's actually because you're not caching enough, or something's changed about your content structure that means that a lot more requests are missing the CDN, are coming down to the back end. And that maybe that's something you need to fix, and that's where the monitoring comes in. But from a platform perspective, the platform will deal with it for you, and it will scale to meet the requirements of the incoming requests.
Right.
That's awesome.
This is part of why you have the quote unquote limitations of cloud service, that you can't go ahead and just go in and change something under apps like you could on-prem, because the way that they actually have done it behind the scenes, if you care for the details, is they actually broke content sections of AEM into a common data store that's shared amongst the clustered servers. But the clustered servers all actually have their own copy of things like apps and libs, so that they can still be highly performant. But in order for that to actually work, you gotta make sure they're all doing the same exact code, and that's why you can't mess around on there. So those are the reasons behind some of why you can't do some things just willy-nilly. You have to do it through the pipelines in cloud service, so you can get that automatic clustering even on your author servers.
Yeah, and I think
guess
that
it's that give and take, isn't it? It's kind of you're accepting some of the limitations for the huge advantage of not having to care about the architecture and the infrastructure side of it. That you say, actually, yeah, I'll accept some limitations just because the platform's going to deal with all of the stuff. Previously, you'd have to manage that stuff as scaling and bringing on new servers, or upscaling and downscaling.
And it seems like Adobe's implemented kind of the latest and greatest infrastructure best standards as well as cloud service, right? So binary less replication, like Martin hinted at, it's clustered by default. And so those are things that you typically have to worry about if you're on-prem, or even AMS, right? In AMS, even if they'll manage it, you kind of have to guide them through that process, or whatever you'd like configured. And so to me, that's a huge advantage of cloud service. I know that's a question that's maybe coming up in general, but I think that's a big point. And it essentially reduces your investment in ops and DevOps into the entire system. I think that's a huge advantage.
It'd be interesting to know, Martin, if the question that was coming up with the word cluster, which is the old clustering, AEM instances where you have this one writer, one reader, or one writer and multiple readers, right? And I also had a bottleneck as well. I suppose the critical thing you'd notice with the SaaS now, it's Docker container based. So it's the clustering is like, it's not technically clustering, because just service load balancing as per se, right? So it's different concepts. You have Mongo doing the clustering as per se, but it's also a service and it's a farm, and it totally works. The concepts don't stack up like the old clustering concepts. Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of, it's almost a switch of mindset, that if you're used to previously in managed services or on-prem, that you're generally used to, you have to think about, okay, how many servers am I going to have? What are the size of the service? How many published instances? How many dispatchers? How am I going to lay them out? What are all the internal networking? And with cloud service, you don't have to think about any of that. You just say, okay, I have a dev server, I have a staging server, I have a published, I have these different types of systems, but within those, that you don't have to really care, and other than the amount of cost is going to be relative to the amount of sort of stuff you're doing in those environments.
Yeah.
And that's where actually you can then concentrate your kind of effort on ensuring that you've got, you know, good caching and that your content is set up in the correct way, so it's going to be performant, and that then you can actually allow the platform to manage itself.
Makes sense. All right. Let's see if we can move to question 3. This one is for Max, I believe. It's about Adobe status and when customers are seeking additional notifications, pre-release activating the feature release now available, things like that. How are they impacted by outage? And as noted in Adobe status, and are there more specific details within notifications through Cloud Manager UI? And if there's anything like that from Adobe coming up, and when?
Oh, well, yeah, that'll be a good question. It's coming up. We'll talk to Robert about that. Definitely, I think I myself has been the receiving end of some of these things. Yeah, where you go to bed and you feel comfy, everything's working. You wake up in the morning, release happened. You're like, I didn't do a release. It automatically happened. So yeah, it's supposed through, and there's some questions will come up. We'll answer this through. So officially, really, the channels are getting notifications. Is you'll really have to go back to your basically account representative, right, from Adobe, and they'll help you to prioritize you and give you more notifications, and maybe plan with you the releases, because they can do that. Unofficially, from what I found, the best way of dealing with it, and that's going to be part of all the best practices. SaaS is basically a daily release, so everybody has to be aware. Like basically every day, Adobe can push a change. So, and the way to guarantee that your stuff works is really focus on the functional testing. And because that's already part of the pipeline. It's already there. If you add it and you make it as detailed and as low as possible for your implementation, so that if you can break it yourself, and then when the release will run, it'll also break and it'll stop the release from happening. So that's how you can really hack the thing in a way. So that, and it's just like a hack, but it's also really good benefit. One, you helping yourself because you actually having these kind of special things that may break for you, and having lots of functional tests to test every single thing that you really need will also break the release pipeline if they're releasing automatically. So that's really, and that's how you should be working anyway, right? So because right now, I've been on the receiving end where I didn't do the functional tests, and pipeline runs and it goes, well, everything's cool. So as far as you're concerned, whatever you deployed working, but well, no, because we have a special code or special functionality. So really, the only way from what I can see now is just focus your attention on the functional tests, because it pays off in long term.
Right.
And something that we were sharing yesterday also is that for outages or major system things that are happening, Adobe does have status.adobe.com. And when we were exploring yesterday, you could see if there's outages across different products that Adobe has, including Adobe Experience Manager and Cloud Service. And then if there is an outage, you can subscribe to a notification to figure out when it's, they'll send an email when it's back up. And then we discovered, which was new to me, that there's also a way to manage subscriptions. And so for future outages, you can subscribe to those as well. So I'll put the link in the chat for that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, we use that. The status.adobe.com is a great thing even for non-cloud. It's useful to be aware of what's going on with all the different bits of Adobe infrastructure, things like the single sign-on or any of those pieces that might be interrelated into your infrastructure or Cloud Manager and things like that. It might be that your site is fine, but Cloud Manager itself is down for some reason. It just means you can't do deployments and those kind of things. And you can be really granular and sort of sign up to those, and you'll get immediate alerts saying actually there's an issue in this particular region or that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
And I think just real quickly, Max, sort of you've opened a little tip of the box, I would say, test-driven development. When you're looking at a continuous release system, right? The whole point, or one of the major points you want to go with AEM as a cloud service is the fact that you don't have to do service packs anymore, which is super exciting. But also, to Max's point, you go to sleep and you wake up and there is a new release. So you have to put checks and balances. There is a reason if you don't have 50% unit tests on your pipeline, the pipeline stops, right?
Yeah.
It's contractual for you to go I know that I might be breaking something here, but I'm gonna accept. So please don't. Make sure, and I've seen this, and it's easier when you're doing a new implementation, right? If we're being fully honest, because you're okay, I have to put 20-30% of my scrum time, my development time towards testing, and it should be truly driven by tests, right? When you're doing a migration, things get a little bit muddy. I've probably most of my clients did not hit that 50% when we were doing that migration, which does make the migration process a little longer. But it's strongly recommend go back, go make sure you have your unit tests, because even when you're doing migrations, when you were doing upgrades with service packs, you were sort of jamming the code in to see what breaks and what doesn't, right? Which is not systematic. It's not setting yourself up for success here. So just make sure, whether it's functional testing, whether it's unit testing, make sure that your code is protected. So when these releases happen, you're also protected.
Yeah. So the unit test I found, Remy, is that the service releases skip the unit test check, but they can't skip functional tests. So they don't. So
Yep.
unit test. So if you have, you know how usually if you have unit tests and they're below the threshold, they'll ask you for prompt. Well, that doesn't happen on the maintenance releases. Just bypasses that and goes, no worries. You have 5% unit test. I'll just deploy it. So, but the functional test it can't skip. Cool.
I think you're muted, Greg. Were you? Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. You're back.
Unmuting. I don't think I did that, but all right. We're at the 25-minute mark. I was saying we have only 3 questions. Let's see if we can. If anyone in the meeting wants to jump in and ask questions, feel free to do that. We want to make this as conversational as possible as well, and let us know where you're from. You know, kind of create more interactivity for the conversation here. We'd love that. We have 44. Excluding us in the meeting, 44 participants. So we can make this a lively conversation. And again, if we don't cover any of the questions, we'll get back to you on these questions via email. We'll reach out to you, no worries. But yeah, feel free to jump in at any time if you have questions. So we're here for you. If we don't have any questions, we'll talk about best practices for optimizing content requests in AEM post-launch, or anything about getting ahead to ensure like we don't jump ahead to forecasted budget for licenses and stuff like that. How we can prevent like overblowing our budgets and stuff. So optimizing content requests in AEM post-launch. I don't know, Max, did you want to?
Well, I can kick it off. I mean, I would have
Yeah.
said we'll just unmute Ramy and he can continue the conversation about anything if we don't have any questions. He'll make some up for us. Yeah. So cool. We got a question. Yeah. So the question
Thanks.
came in. This is no worries, Ramy. Yeah. Well, you're the most good looking here and you're the biggest talker. So it's fantastic. It's like all best things you can have. So the question here, and Brett, feel free to jump in as soon as we're ready. I mean, the question was about content requests, right? So if you read the content request manual and document on that exists on the site, it covers essentially the request coming into AEM site. So anything that gets served from AEM, and the question is how to minimize that. Obviously, if you have your own CDN, you still have to report the usage, so you can't hide behind your own CDN as far as licensing concerns. But at the same time, I see things like this. Yeah, if you make a HTML-based website or focused on HTML, yeah, and you have content that's cacheable, basically cacheable really well, yeah, you're gonna drop the content requests, right? Because they're gonna be cached at the browser, they're gonna be cached at Fastly, yeah, and they're not going to be hitting the AEM as much as possible. Yeah, so I think that's for me first priority. And then also I also question a lot of sites that use AEM as essentially like a data source, yeah, or a proxy for a data source, yeah. So you don't, and this was like a lot of classical implementations I've seen where you hit AEM to get access to some service in the backend, yeah, and that would just basically it's a free for all for getting data on your service. So I think in those patterns, we're using AEM as a proxy, then you probably need to review those and saying, don't do that. Yeah, that's not actually, that's an anti-pattern for a CMS per se. Yeah, have your own data service hosted on your own domain, and then we're gonna see a lot of requests drop. Yeah. Brett.
Yep.
Sure. I mean, a few other areas where I've seen wasteful requests, like, I mean, so if you're making GraphQL calls, you can combine types. If you're doing React type components on the front end of AEM because you want to share some of your React code for other applications, or your developers like that pattern or whatever, just because something's running in React and use data doesn't mean it has to actually make a call to go get that data. You just serve the JSON along with it. Like, let's say you're doing a location finder and you have 20 locations, you could put those locations directly into the page as a JSON, and the JavaScript can consume it that way too, rather than making a separate API call for every single time somebody loads that page. Some of those little things that seem like little things, but if it happens every single time somebody loads a page, it's actually quite a bit. Or also too, if you're moving to cloud service, in the past, a lot of people had client libraries, so JavaScript, CSS, they were all very separate libraries, all kind of loaded individually. Nowadays, if you're using a modern archetype and such, all that should be compiled through Webpack, so you're doing single requests for those things. They'll still be very efficient. It'll just be less calls. So there's a lot of things. I think you just got to kind of analyze, where are we making the calls, and there's usually ways to kind of optimize that.
Yeah, I feel like all the things that were shared by both Max and Brett they're not only beneficial for saving content requests to the cloud service, but it's also beneficial for performance in general. So I think they're really, really good points. Like adding expires header, making things cachable on the client sides is going to make it more performant and less requests as well. I really like, Brett, the point that you made about the JSON embedded. I feel like that's always a lost opportunity for performance. If there's not a ton of content, preload that content, just render that in the HTML and then use that in your JavaScript. I think that was a really good one.
Thank you, guys. All right, half-hour mark. We got at least. Yeah, go ahead.
We did get quite a few in the chat, by the way. I don't know if you saw those, Greg.
Okay.
I'm trying to catch up on the chat.
Yeah.
So
did you guys want?
There's shorter answers, just as a teaser.
Yeah. Did you guys want to switch to those?
I think we should. If they join the call, I think it might be good to address the live questions.
Okay, because we have the other ones, written ones, so we can reply back and post it on our chapter page and everything like that, or via email.
If we get likes, if people see in the comments, and if you put hearts or likes or thumbs up on questions, we see the ones that have the biggest popularity, and we can just address them because we've got a good stream of questions there. Do the first one with 3 hearts there.
And my meeting chat is shot. I'm not seeing the questions posted there. Sorry. And I had posted the links there as well for chapter hours, the application page and the onboarding journey, but it's just I'm getting the messages that are failed to send. So sorry about that.
We can kick one off. We have a few here. Obviously, there's the first one appeared with a two thumbs up. How is AEM as a cloud service handle security issues, e.g. DDoS attacks?
Very important question.
Yeah, and so a couple of things that I did. It was one of the teaser answers. So AEM's cloud service has Fastly in front of it. Everything that Fastly provides when it comes to security is now provided to the consumer or to the user of AEM as a cloud service. So whether it's DOS attacks, whether it's set of rules and policies, etc. Now keep in mind that your typical dispatcher security sets and set of rules, so your filters, the way you deal with requests, etc., are still valid. So in short, CDN protection. I know DOS attacks are a big thing, so you have a CDN in front of it. Now keep in mind something, you do get the option of opting out of Fastly. However, Adobe does require you to replace it with a different CDN. So I've had clients in the past where they want to use Akamai just because they like Akamai. If that's the case, then whatever you're going to be using as the CDN has to handle these things. So Akamai has also a great engine when it comes to DOS attacks, etc. Just keep that in mind.
Hey, this is
I found
sorry. I raised that question. Sorry, my major, I want to understand the WAF, the web application firewall perspective. So when we talk to Adobe, whether it is included, it's a mixed conversation. So topics are responses. Some cases they say yes, it's part of the solution. Some cases it's not. Right. That's what my question is more towards that. Right. Whether they have any web application firewall bundle with their cloud solution. We can trust on that, or we need to take care of our external tools, right? So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
And let me. So from my discussion with AEM the Cloud Service, the team, my understanding is it is bundled because again it's provided at the edge, which is where the CDN is. For the sake of confirming, let me take that one and just talk to them again as a direct question and get back to you on that. But I'm pretty confident it should be there.
I can confirm it to you, Rami. It is part of that. I mean, because I suppose WAF is a concept where you implement your own data centers, right? But this is sitting in front of CDN one, so you only allow to get ports that are 80. Plus, you have the proxy mechanism, which you can have VPNs established. So yeah, so for your peace of mind, it is included. So if you have any security questionnaires, you'd be saying it's included, and you can defer to the Adobe for answer for any specific things you want to look for.
Yeah, and I believe there's potentially some sort of roadmap style things around like enhancing the ability to customize those kind of layers. So things like the CDN layer and those kind of things, giving you more control over that, and rather than it being sort of effectively black box as it kind of is in a lot of the stuff now, is actually enabling you to have some control over what is happening at the CDN layer and the WAF type configuration, so you can be a bit more sort of custom around those configurations rather than basically relying on a standard config.
And I think they announced that at Summit as well. So I think they called those configuration pipelines within Cloud Manager. And that's, to me, I'm really excited about that, to be able to customize fastly. I'm curious what those configurations will be. And I personally haven't heard, so if you guys have, it'd be interesting to hear, but what CDN and WAF configurations could potentially be there in the pipeline. So does that answer your question, whoever was asking?
Yep. Thank you. Makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for participating in the conversation. Yeah, let me switch back to one of the ones that we had pre-submitted, and you guys can look at the chat. We're 36 minutes in here. So there was a question about custom run modes, and specifically, what are the custom run modes supported in the latest prod ready version of AEM as a cloud service? And I think Martin was going to take that one. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so effectively, this is similar to the we're talking about the architecture, is that by design, Adobe have limited how run modes work. So you have a very strict set of run modes in cloud service. They've recently actually added one, which is the rapid dev environment. So you've got rapid dev environments, RDE,
right.
You've got dev, stage, and prod. And effectively, they're your only run modes. And then you've got author and publish as the server types. And it's another of these things of, by design, they're limiting it to a specific set because you have, effectively, it controls the way in which things work. And so you effectively only have those ones that you can target your configurations at. And then if you need a bit more flexibility, you do have the option to set environment variables. So you can do that via like the Cloud Manager API. You can set an environment variable on a specific environment. So for instance, if you've got multiple dev environments or multiple rapid dev environments, in your code base, you can have the same config, which is targeted to that run mode, but then some of those config values might be environment specific. And so you can say, actually, for this value, we don't have a set value for this configuration value. It might be, I don't know, like an API key or something like that. You can store those either as a standard environment variable or as a secret against that particular environment. And then when that instance is deployed to, rather than it getting a fixed value for that key for that run mode, it will read it from the actual environment of the running system. So you do get some flexibility there, but it's effectively only within a given run mode that you can have. If you've got multiple servers with the same run mode, you can effectively apply a different value for that specific instance of it. But it is at the sort of it's at the environment level. So a whole rapid dev environment or specific dev environment or your specific stage or prod environment is going to have it has a fixed set of config for that. You can't have config and things that are specific to individual servers within that cluster, because that's the way the architecture works. And you can't define your own things as saying, okay, I want to effectively name this dev environment, give it like a meaningful name. Effectively, you'd have to do that using environment variables.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Is there any other question in the chat that you guys want to take, or do you want me to look at the pre-submitted ones?
Well, we can. There's a couple of
entice?
in there. Maybe one of the quick ones. Rami, do you want to do a quick rapid fire of your quick answers? Because you've got a few in there.
Sure. Yeah, I can go through them really quickly. I think we've answered a couple. So there was one about the content sync. It is coming. I did not know it was in beta, so that's fantastic. I'll be emailing some people at Adobe because I do want to play with it. The second one, it's a longer one, but I'll try to sum it up as fast as I can. Franklin versus AEM. Well, we don't call it Franklin. I don't know what the long name. I keep forgetting what the long name is. Robert is going to let me know. But
composability.
Franklin is meant to be an add-on to what AEM is, right? So your content management system is still AEM. Franklin or that tool is meant to be a way to have rapid content authoring through a tool that businesses used to, i.e., or Document or Google Sheets or whatever you choose. I don't think they should be put in verses. It's really, what is your business case? To me, and again, personally, I have the idea of templated pages, components, being able to flex. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to drag and dropping components on the page, etc. AEM is the way, right? That sounds very Mandalorian-like. When you're looking at Franklin, the idea is you have pre-templated pages. And your concentration is you just want this Word document. It's not going to change shape or form. People go in, change the content, very, very fast time to market, but you do lose the elasticity of having to change the page structure, right? So it's a give and take relationship between the two. Again, like I said, I wouldn't put them as one versus the other. It's really one complete seller in a way.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely seen hints at Light Summit as well of there being stuff going over the top, which will sort of bridge those gaps and make it so you've got the almost from an authoring perspective, you don't really need to care where the content lives. You're just sort of authoring, and effectively that will drive down into wherever the data source, whether that is in, you know, the new world, or it's in AEM, or it's in something else. So you've got this kind of universal way of managing that content. And I definitely agree. Like there's a it's the kind of types of content and the way in which you want to manage your content. It may be that in certain cases, yeah, you've got like high speed and large volume that were actually, that is, there's a clear drive there to say, actually, we just want to create the content. We're already potentially probably creating it in Word anyway, and that kind of thing. And then you can just very quickly get it out. Whereas actually other types of content, you're going to be more sort of authoring about it and more layout driven and things like that, and more specific to your endpoint.
Personally,
and it's kind of that mixture of both.
Yeah, personally, that's what Martin hinted at is personally what I'm excited about the most. And we had talked about that at Summit a little bit too, where they talked about the universal editor. And to me, that completes the whole. It bridges the functionality between Franklin, AEM, being able to edit content fragments from a site that's hosted outside of AEM. I think that could be super powerful. I'll put a link in the chat on the universal editor too. That one's in beta as well.
Thank you, Goran. Yeah. All right.
There was one, Greg. I think there was a question that came up a couple of times about return on investment going from AEM as a cloud service versus AEM, and we sort of have a question in the list as well that talks about the differences between the two.
Yeah, let's.
And I think these two overlap. And it was, I think Max, you had that one.
I just put a rapid fire of different things in there. So yeah, I think everybody can answer it. I mean, I can give you my perspective. Well, it's cloud native from SaaS perspective. It manages containers. That's a huge benefit. That has a flow on not only in prod but also to development practices. Yeah, which you can't get with anything else. There's no manual access to anything, which is fantastic. That's what you want. You want to get nobody logs in anywhere and nobody does anything dodgy. Like that's the biggest killer for managed service as well. Yeah, and then managed service. Yeah, it's the classic infra. All the problems we always had. You know, the WAF stuff. All of this network. These are all the things you don't need to worry about 2023, right? These all should be like the service provided. Thank you very much. Where we go, yeah. Just worry about how to get containers running on local. It's managed as a service, so that methodology that Martin mentioned, you have to think in service, and that's just like you have to do how many assets I'm going to need, how much space I'm going to need. You need to worry about that. That's just the cloud thing. There's an endless storage and endless CPU, yeah. And as I mentioned, manual access to managed service, which is which is like people like it, but you don't want it because you make more problems for yourself long term. I've seen so many migration projects where people have logged into the servers and modified them, and you're like, well, I didn't know that. It's not in the code.
Yeah.
So and then you find it right at the end. You're like, oh yes, actually we tweaked it on the server. So that's a bad thing. Yeah. So.
All right. Good.
I do think the move to cloud service, I think it's very easy to look at the benefits that are of the infrastructure, which I think, Max, you're covering. I think a lot of places also have to acknowledge a lot of the companies that are still on prem are ones that have the CQ 5.4 code base that's been upgraded through the last 10 years of an amazing evolution of AEM, but we are like light years away from when these code bases were created. Yeah. And so what ends up happening is when you go to cloud service, a lot of times the best way to go to cloud service for customers is to modernize the code base as well, not just get it working on cloud service, because then, okay, you'll get some of the infrastructure benefits, but even just getting things modernized to the latest and greatest patterns, you're going to get some unspoken benefits in terms of your author. It's going to be a lot more efficient, you know, far fewer components in terms of their flexibility and how they can switch between styles. Things are going to perform better, like images on your sites. Like back in the day, you used to have to select renditions and try to fit the right one for the right size, depending on the CSS and whatever. And now all that stuff just automatically happens. And hey, if a mobile thing's viewing it, it's full page width, it's going to get you the 400 pixel one. And if it's on desktop, but it's 3 wide, it's going to get you the 500 pixel one. All that stuff is just magically automatic now if you're following the latest patterns. So I do think there's a huge opportunity for a lot of these code bases to, instead of just get it working on cloud service and you'll get some of the infrastructure benefits, but if you go the extra mile to kind of make sure that it's purpose built for cloud service, you're going to make sure that you're at the forefront. And thankfully, I know there's a lot of evolution of AEM over 6.1 through 6.5. Things have stabilized pretty well. And so if you get up to the latest and greatest patterns now, actually make that jump, it's a lot less costly to maintain than maybe it has been in the past.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think as we've said on a lot of these things, there's a bit of a fundamental sort of shift of perspective to, if you've been working with on-prem or managed service AEM in the past, effectively you didn't really need to care about like CDN hit ratios and things like that, because as long as your servers are big enough, you can take all the hits on your servers and it doesn't cost you any more, because you're paying a fixed fee for the infrastructure you're paying for. So if that infrastructure can manage all of those requests, then it doesn't cost you any more. When you shift to cloud, because of the different effectively charging model, doing that sort of modernization makes sense as well, because if you can change the way your content is structured or change the way in which like your caching behavior works and things like that, to forward cache everything and reduce file size and those processes to make it so that effectively it's more performant, you're going to see a bigger cost reduction, because if you can forward cache everything and make your cache first effectively content, then you can see the most benefit out of moving to cloud. And that you're not necessarily going to get all of those. And it makes it more predictable as well, because then you can use all of your analytics to determine, actually, we know how much it's going to cost us over time. If we have peaks or things like that, we can predict how much those are going to cost, and those kind of things. Whereas actually, if you just shifted and just say, okay, the same thing as we did before, but cloudify it, that's going to probably be the most expensive way to use cloud, because you're not benefiting from a lot of the point of moving to a new platform.
Spoken like a true financial planner. Thank you, Martin. That's good. Yeah.
Greg, if you don't mind, I'm going to add one more thing to it. I think it's worth mentioning that with cloud service, there's additional functionality you'll get that you don't have in on-prem. And I think there's a lot of little things. One thing that one client was really appreciative of recently is just being able to optimize images and serve those from Dynamic Media, which is built into it. So you don't need to have a Dynamic Media license, but you get that free functionality when you're using the core components. One that I think is not talked about enough, which has been really powerful for a particular client that was able to move sites quickly over from another CMS to AEM, is site templates, and not site templates in like the blueprint or page template mindset, but the one that integrates with the front end pipeline. So you basically, a typical pipeline is going to run for 45 minutes or so. A front end pipeline takes about 5 to 10 minutes to run. and you're able to deploy code to AEM really, really fast. And that's because you're not really touching any of the Java or backend code, but just theming the sites. And once you have a set of reusable components, spinning up themes and being able to deploy that really fast can be really, really powerful. And so that type of functionality is only available in cloud service. And I think there's an array of functionality that cloud service also opens up, which is nice.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. We got about like 12 minutes. We'll go a little minute over maybe. I wanted to switch to everyone's favorite SEO, and kind of talk about like what we can do with any. There are two questions really. I'm going to try to combine so because we have less time. SEO dips. Post migration from like let's say 6465. How are you preparing business for the drop in SEO that might come with the migration, and how are you preparing for the least amount of disruption to business migration brings with content? And then to combine it with, if anyone runs a commerce AEM integration, how is SEO for dynamic pages and parameters and URLs being handled, not to impact organic SEO? I think we'll give this to Rami to begin with. Go ahead, Rami.
Sounds good. So before I answer the question, what's SEO or how is SEO measured, right? And I won't go into details because there's a lot in there, but there's two different things when you're looking at SEO, right? It's page content anywhere from the head to the body tag and everything in between, right? And the performance of the page, whether it's on a mobile platform, on a desktop platform, so your image optimization, all this good stuff. Essentially, how long does it take the page to render from A to Z, right? So let's look at bucket one. Bucket one will not be affected by the migration, or at least it should not. If you're taking apples for apples because you're rendering the same DOM, so it's the same head tag, it's the same content, nothing has changed. And I'll get back to that in a second. Now, if you look at bucket two, which is performance, the major difference that you're going to get is the fact that you now have a full-on functional CDN. So the question is, did you optimize that CDN to serve the purpose? From the migrations that I've done, I have yet to find a migration where the performance of the page went the other way. It was always greener, it was always faster because your HTML is being cached on a CDN, your images, your JavaScript, your essentially everything. Make sure that your client libs are being cached. It's the little things. So once you go into AEM as a cloud service, you'll notice that all of your client libs will get that automatic hash at the end of it. So cache it. Everybody on this call guaranteed went through a problem where the client libs would get deployed, but then you're still seeing the old client libs. And that's simply because it was always the same call. See, it always happened. ACS Commons at some point had a solution where they started adding the hash. That entire functionality now is within AEM as a cloud service. So there is no reason not to cache your client libs. So just set up your Fastly configurations properly through the dispatcher files, and then you should be golden. Now to move into commerce, let's go back to part number one. It's all about page content. So in order to have a quote unquote dynamic page, that does not mean that you need to use a query, right? So a lot of the times, think of a search page. Search page is usually /search.html !q equals blah. And then you pick up on that element and then you render the page all client side in most cases. Commerce, and I'm going to look into that not just in the context of Adobe Commerce, i.e. Magento, using SIF, right? There's other things that you can do. But at the end of the day, how do you deliver the page? This has nothing to do with the backend implementation as much as what's your information architecture of the site? What's your URL structure? Is it meaningful to an SEO? Yeah. Are you doing the whole /product number where it's totally meaningless? Or do you have /paintbrush, right? So a lot of these things, they're not necessarily how fast the page is, because we're thinking now the page is going to cache properly. So PDP, PLP, are these pages uniquely represented for an SEO engine to be able to go in and pull that information and index it properly? Looking at the head tag, a lot of the stuff is your title proper. If you have multiple languages for the same products or the same product listing, is that being included? So your hreflang, your canonical URLs. Again, I don't think this is AEM specific, to be honest. This is very SEO specific, where unique identifier in the URL, unique content in the page, and it's optimized whether it's images as well as DOM content. And I said that way too fast, so I'm going to pass it on to the team to add anything.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rami. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Lastly, I just remember you can always use selectors to make a unique URL, even if you have a dynamic page, which is a template, and have that be read by AEM to differentiate the page so that you're not using a query string. If you're worried about the fact that query strings are not cacheable by the dispatcher, that's pretty simple to work around by just using a selector instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that feeds into what we said on other questions, isn't it? It's all about, and even for non-cloud, it's kind of really looking at being a heavily cached. That's how you're going to get the best page performance, is by getting everything as far forward cached as you can get it, so it's as close to the end user as possible, and that it doesn't rely on the constantly having to go all the way back to the back end servers and that kind of thing. So then you can get high load speeds and all that sort of stuff, and from an end user perspective it's going to be blisteringly fast, and then you have to deal with that just by the way you architect the structure of content, or the way in which your links are built and things like that with selectors or those kind of things, so you can enforce that cacheability of your content.
Makes sense. Let's see, we got like 5 minutes left, 6. I think we could, if you don't have anything in the chat that stands out, or you don't want to, you don't have time to address now, maybe we can combine questions that had to do with like, the migration stuff, migration from 6.5 to AEM as a cloud service. Like, what's the biggest challenge when making the switch to cloud services? And obviously we've touched a little bit about the main differences between managed services and cloud service, but those kinds of things, what helps you the most with the migration? That's the whole family of migrating from managed services to cloud services. Anyone can jump in, really.
Brett, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is making sure that you're thinking it through before you jump in. I think the worst thing that you can do is just say, well, let's just start updating things, because depending on where you're going and what you want to get out of cloud service, it might not be even your cheapest way there. And so I think that's the big thing. Like, I think it's very tempting to think, well, if I just update all the different individual things and just get it do as little as possible to get it cloud service compliant, and then I'll upgrade it from there, you actually might be setting yourself up for a longer road and a little bit more cost. I think, looking towards ways of doing it incrementally, one of the things that I know we've worked with clients on is Adobe will help you out a little bit in terms of licensing. Don't quote me on this. Obviously, I work with your rep and all that, and it's different in every situation. But you may be able to get a situation where you can get a way where you can have both on-prem and cloud service running side by side for a period of time and not paying full double licensing, so that you can start getting bits and pieces up there. Can we put one of the microsites up there? Can we get a base set of the components that we want to use, so that once you get a site working up there, then to get the next piece up there is a little bit less work, because you've got the base components. Now we just got to add maybe another 10 components. Now we can support this site, and slowly but surely get individual pieces up there, so that you're not trying to do some giant big bang migration. And I think when you do it that way too, there's times where you can actually combine it with other strategic initiatives at your company. So for instance, let's say there's a new microsite that needs to be built. Well, hey, let's put that directly on cloud service to start with, and we can leverage the marketing dollars that are going into that, and that'll give us a base starting point. We'll have a base project. The archetype will all be there. All the base services will be there. All the configuration will be there, so that when we start migrating the rest of the stuff, it's less of a lift. So a lot of times you really do want to take a step back and analyze the full situation. What are some other business initiatives going on? What makes sense to go there? And then figure out what is the incremental path to go there. I would never really recommend for most of these very large implementations that host dozen sites or whatever to try to do it all in one fell swoop. I just don't think you're going to get the best result that way.
Right. Solid points, definitely.
Yep, very cool. And I mean, I suppose we have a question that says about what is the best practices for migration. Yeah, that's one of those open-ended. I think the best thing I could do for you, just find some people who've done it before and let them help you to decide. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. I mean, there is things that you can decide, but there are things that you're gonna like, oh yes, we did this before and it didn't work, and those questions you're not gonna be able to figure out yourself until you go down the road. Yeah, so I highly encourage you, seek out someone that you know. I mean, you can reach out to this team. This team has been through this a lot of times. because I find it myself, the few first times I actually got people from Adobe to help me out, and that was invaluable. Yeah. So, and you're not always gonna get that help, but yeah, from Adobe guys, but because they're always very busy, but definitely reaching out to third parties, which we've done. Quite a few people already done migrations, so there's a lot of lessons learned to be. I mean, just even looking at your existing setup will be a good eye opener for you as well.
And Adobe Experience League, right? I mean, I posted a question in Adobe Experience League as well. Like for myself, that's been invaluable. In the past, I had posted something that had to do with analytics and AEM even, and I got a response within the first 2 hours, which was great. But yeah, there's an onboarding journey too from managed services to on the Adobe Experience League pages, and you can take it step by step. Best practice analyzer, it's a tool you can use to see how to best go about your migration, where your code base might be lacking, or you might need some attention to pay more attention there, stuff like that. But yeah,
Just
so
really
we have
quickly
1 minute to
add
spare.
that
Yeah.
With the best practice analyzer, keep in mind that the challenges might not be code. The challenges might be content as well. So keep that in mind. It's not so. The BPA doesn't just look at your code and your deprecation, all this other stuff. It also looks at the node structure, so it has to be run. And honestly, I find it more valuable when it comes to content, because I'm not going to go through every single page and every single node than it is through code, because code is a little bit more systematic. And on top of the BPA, there are tools that would help you do the migration. There are some tools that you can run on your dispatcher configurations, for example, where it will attempt, or at least do the first 40, 50, 60, 70% of the work, where it tries to restructure the files to be more cloud compatible. Just be careful that it's meant to be a starting point. It is not a silver bullet. It's not going to just do the migration for you. It's a starting point, underlined.
Yeah.
Back to you, Greg.
And Rami, I'll add to that as well. When you guys are migrating, you got to get things working locally the right way from the start. Don't try to use the old setups. You got to go, okay, we have to modernize everyone's local setup. So it's going to be like cloud. It can't be just like, oh, I'm just running jar files here. It's not going to help you.
Right.
So you got to go Docker as well, native Docker on your locals. Then you'll be able to at least know what's going to happen when it hits the cloud. You want to make sure you get things working in dev as it's in prod. Don't skip out. Don't just go, I'm just going to just deploy stuff into dev and then just going to test it all in prod. No. The dev's supposed to look just like prod. You have all the URLs, all of the SSL certificates, all of your code deployed, all your dispatch. Dev should look like production. Yeah, get the content from prod, whatever you need to do. If you don't do that, you're just gonna basically push this thing uphill, and it's gonna be a hard road for you.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's the main key. I see a lot of people do that. They skip doing the dev. They just go, nah, we'll just do it all in prod. And no, the dev and stage are there for you to cover you. Yeah. So if dev doesn't work, don't even bother thinking about releasing. Just go, sorry guys, can't do it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you all, guys. I think we're a minute over. Any questions that we didn't get, we'll reply back via email. This platform that Adobe is using has your email, so we can reach out if we didn't get to answer your questions. Please join us in a future session. We're trying to do these once every month or bi-monthly, depending on like what kind of feedback we get from you. So shameless plug-in for the Adobe Experience Manager Champion program again. Please go ahead and submit your application from to be considered May 2nd to June 2nd, and we'd like to see you participate in this group. Thank you so much to our panelists, especially UK, Australia guys. Like, I don't even know, it's 1:30 a.m. there for Max, so
yes,
it's just starting his day after not sleeping. But thank you, Gaurang and Brett and Rami and all of you who participated and submitted your questions. We hope to see you in a future session. Everyone, a great rest of the day, and thank you all again. Adobe Experience Manager rules. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Bye.
guys. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.